There was nothing remarkable about Grayson Forensic Center from the outside. It looked like every other state institution built in the 1920s. 4 stories of red brick. Window bars painted white. The remains of a landscaped courtyard that had not been maintained in over a decade. Someone once cared what it looked like. By the 1960s, no one did. Patients rarely left. Staff rarely stayed. The building existed in a space between funding and abandonment. It was not a place where people recovered. It was where people stopped being seen. The state records listed as a psychiatric holding facility. The court documents use a different word. Containment. Most of the patients did not arrive voluntarily. Many were found incompetent to stand trial. Others were admitted by family signatures that were never followed by a second visit. It did not matter if their diagnoses were correct. They were no longer part of the public world. They were numbers inside a structure designed to forget them. The only metric that mattered inside Grayson was compliance. If you followed orders, took medication, and did not create conflict, the staff wrote notes calling you manageable. If you refused medication, raised your voice, or disrupted the ward, you were labeled something else. Uncooperative, unresponsive to custodial direction, non-retainable. That term appears repeatedly in the internal documents. Non-retainable. It never appears in public records. Only in internal memos. The word does not describe a diagnosis. It describes a decision. The first documented disappearance inside Grayson occurred in January of 1965. A man in his 50s with chronic schizophrenia refused a night dose of thorazine. He insisted it made his muscles lock, that it stopped him from swallowing. The overnight nurse wrote an incident report. A staff physician signed it. The next morning he was gone. There is no record of transport. There is no death certificate. There is a single handwritten note in the margin of the census log. Vacancy acknowledged. 3 weeks later, another patient disappeared. Then another. No alarms were raised. No investigations were launched. The missing were always patients who resisted treatment. Patients who were loud. Patients who required more time than the staff had. Grayson was overcrowded and understaffed. Removing the difficult ones made the building easier to run. In any other institution, a staff member would have been responsible for escorting those patients to isolation or to medical procedure rooms. At Grayson, that task fell to someone else. A patient named Samuel Cooper. He arrived in the spring of 1964. 28 years old. Arrested after a violent incident that he could not remember. Declared mentally unfit for trial. The intake notes describe him as highly compliant, polite, quick to apologize, submissive, under stress. He followed every direction without hesitation. He thanked the staff for ordering him to do things. Doctors described him as someone driven by guilt and a need for approval. In the first months, he kept to himself. Then he began helping with simple ward tasks, carrying trays, fetching linens, escorting patients to the day room under supervision. No one stopped him. The staff was exhausted. Any willing body was put to work, even if they wore patient clothing. When patients objected, when they were frightened, when they refused to go where he led them, Samuel apologized softly and continued guiding them. He did not raise his voice. He did not restrain them. He simply repeated what the staff had told him. "It's better if you come with me." By the end of 1965, 7 patients had vanished from the census. 6 of those 7 were last recorded walking with Samuel. The pattern did not appear in daily logs, only in audit documents discovered years later. The doctors rewarded him for this helpfulness. They told him he was different from the others. They said he was responsible. They said he was trusted. The praise was deliberate. He began watching other patients closely. He observed who refused medication, who argued, who cried, who made staff angry. Less than a year after his arrival, he began bringing those people to the locked ward at the end of the South Corridor. They followed him because he walked calmly. He spoke gently. He told them it would be temporary. Once they crossed that threshold, he never saw them again. He never asked where they went. He assumed they were moved to another wing. Whenever he returned alone, the staff thanked him. They said he was helping keep the ward safe. On the surface, it appeared he had been given a privileged role. In reality, he had become something else. A filter, a mechanism for selecting those marked as non-retainable. A human compliance instrument. 24 disappearances occurred between 1965 and 1969. Samuel's name is written beside all of them. He believed he was escorting patients for additional care. He believed their absence meant success. That is how the human mind protects itself when confronted with horror it has unknowingly committed. There is no record that he ever asked why none of them returned. He had been trained to accept praise instead of answers. Every disappearance reinforced the loop. Someone would resist. Samuel would take them away. Staff would smile and thank him. He would repeat the behavior. His medical notes describe him as stable. He showed no aggression. He followed orders perfectly. He was released quietly in the summer of 1969. The discharge papers list him as fully recovered. No one questioned why a man once considered dangerous could suddenly be returned to society with no treatment plan. He did not question it either. He walked out to the front gate, believing he had earned freedom. He believed he had finally become useful. He would not understand the truth for 13 more years. Grayson Forensic Center did not close all at once. It dissolved in stages, the way a neglected structure does. Rooms were sealed off. Wings were abandoned. Entire floors were left unstaffed, except for a single night nurse. In early 1971, the state ordered a full shutdown. The official reason was financial. The internal reason was mathematical. During a routine budget assessment, an auditor compared patient census numbers against federal reimbursement logs. 24 patients were being billed. None were physically present. The administrators claimed they had been transferred. The auditor asked where. No one could name a receiving facility. The directive to investigate came 2 weeks later. The first discovery was a locked corridor that did not appear on any updated map of the building. A wall had been built across the original doorway. Plaster, paint, a mounted fire extinguisher, the appearance of a normal wall. The dimensions did not match the architectural plan. Someone had added the wall later. When it was removed, the original steel door was still there. It had been welded shut. They cut the welds. They opened the door. The smell was immediate. Inside was a long, narrow chamber lined with metal gurneys. On each gurney were leather restraints stained dark with age. The floor sloped gently downward toward a drainage grate. The state inspectors noted that the room did not look like a treatment area. There were no cabinets, no monitoring devices, no storage. It looked like a place for temporary holding or permanent disposal. At the far end of the room were 6 cylindrical canisters. The original labels had been scraped off. Chemical residue was tested. Barbiturate compound, fast-acting, lethal at high dose, commonly used in the 1950s for induced sleep therapy. Several canisters were empty. 2 still contained degraded traces of solution. The term therapeutic euthanasia appears nowhere in the paperwork. The inspectors noted a chute door built into the wall behind the canisters. It opened downward into a vertical shaft. Concrete below showed burns. Analysis confirmed traces of human bone among the ash. The disposal method was incineration. There were no burial records, no cremation paperwork, no death certificates. There was no evidence of struggle, only evidence of systematic disappearance. Every patient listed in the missing census column had one shared entry in the ward log. Escorted by Cooper. That was how they tracked a population reduction. Not by procedure, by name. Samuel Cooper. He escorted every missing patient to this hallway. He remained present until the door closed. He then walked back upstairs and was told he had done a good job. He was not the killer in the traditional sense. He did not administer the injections. He did not operate the furnace. He simply delivered the selected individuals on command. The system did the rest. This process continued for 4 years. The nursing staff changed twice. Administrators rotated out. But the escort protocol remained the same. When a patient was deemed non-retainable, they were assigned to Cooper. He believed they were being moved to another ward. He believed the building was helping him make amends. He believed he had done something terrible long ago, and that this was his path to forgiveness. No one corrected him. The institution did not require his understanding. It required his obedience. He performed his role without question. After the 24th disappearance, census reduction criteria were met. 6 weeks later, he was discharged. His release notes describe him as fully rehabilitated, compliant, low risk. He was given clothing, a small cash stipend, and a recommendation for light employment. He thanked the staff on his way out. There is no record that he ever contacted anyone from Grayson again. The investigation into the disappearances was brief. A report was compiled. Evidence was catalogued. No individual employee was charged. The explanation offered was administrative error and incomplete documentation. The building was demolished in late 1973. Only one section of flooring was removed instead of crushed. The isolated burial pit. It was taken under state custody. Its contents remain sealed. Samuel Cooper lived another 11 years. He worked part-time at a hardware store. He attended Sunday services. He never raised his voice. No one ever suspected him of anything. When he died in 1982, His effects were boxed and held for estate processing. Inside one of the boxes was a sealed envelope. Inside the envelope were 24 slips of paper. Each had a single name. The names matched the missing census list exactly. On the reverse of every slip were the same 4 handwritten words. They said I helped. That was the truth he carried until his death. He never apologized. He never confessed. He never understood that the people who praised him were not reassuring him. They were finishing their work through him. There are many kinds of violence. Some are loud. Some leave blood. This violence required neither. Just one obedient man, and a system that taught him that kindness and murder could feel identical, if delivered with a gentle voice. The final recorded evaluation of Samuel Cooper took place 2 years before his death. It was not a criminal interrogation. There were no detectives, no lawyers, no formal charges. It was a routine reassessment conducted by a state social worker who had never worked inside Grayson. She was assigned a standard task: review the files of long-term forensic releases and determine whether follow-up services were needed. She did not know what Grayson had done. She did not know what the word non-retainable meant. She did not know that she was sitting across from a man who had escorted 24 patients to their deaths without ever realizing what he was doing. The interview transcript begins with small talk: employment status, living conditions, general well-being. Samuel answers politely. He apologizes for speaking slowly. He apologizes when he pauses to think. He apologizes when he interrupts himself. He apologizes 23 times in the first 6 pages. The social worker asks if he remembers why he was originally committed. He says the official story was that he hurt someone. He says he has always believed the hospital protected people from him. He says the doctors told him he was doing good work. She asks what he means by good work. He becomes quiet. Then he says that the hospital let him help. He says they trusted him to walk people to the quiet rooms. He says he never hurt anyone. He says he would never hurt anyone. She asks what happened after he walked them there. He says he waited outside. He says someone always thanked him. The transcript marks a pause. He is recorded as saying, "I don't know where they went after that. They were better off somewhere quiet. The world was loud for them. Loud people shouldn't stay." The social worker asks who told him that. He does not remember. She asks if he ever saw any of them again. He shakes his head. She asks what he thinks happened to them. He says this: "I think they got well enough to leave. They didn't come back. That means I helped." Then he asks her a question. He asks if she believes he did good. The transcript notes that the evaluator gently redirected the conversation. She was not trained to detect murder spoken in the grammar of kindness. She wrote that he appeared stable, low risk, no indication of unresolved hostility. She closed the file. No further interviews were scheduled. He lived quietly until his death. No one ever told him what happened to the people he escorted. No one ever confronted him with the drain room, the chemical canisters, the incinerator chute. He died, never understanding that every time someone thanked him, a human being stopped existing. That was how the system was designed. To keep the tool ignorant. to make obedience indistinguishable from virtue. Forensic reevaluation. In 1998, 27 years after the shutdown of Grayson Forensic Center, a committee was formed to review historical psychiatric abuses. Most cases were already known. Grayson was not. Only one surviving copy of the internal census discrepancy report existed. It included no names, only numbers. The only written identifier that linked disappearances to a specific individual was found handwritten in a binder margin. Cooper assisted. The committee assumed this referred to a staff member. They searched employment files. There was no Cooper on payroll. The only Cooper in the archive was a patient. They requested his release records. They found no supervision plan, no medication schedule, and no evidence of post-hospital therapy. Instead, they found the death certificate. Under personal property inventory, one line was highlighted. Envelope, handwritten names. The envelope had been placed in storage. It was retrieved. 24 slips of paper. The missing census names, each with the same phrase on the back. They said, "I helped." That was the only written acknowledgement of the missing. No staff confessions. No signed orders. No official recognition of euthanasia. Just those 4 words, repeated 24 times. The committee did not release their findings publicly. There were no surviving officials to prosecute. There were no bodies. Only scattered bone dust sealed under concrete where the incinerator pit once stood. They closed the file in silence. A summary was written. Patient actions appear to have been conditioned under authority reinforcement. No demonstrable mens rea. No criminal intent. Just obedience. The committee's final line. Conclusion: the Cooper Protocol successfully removed resistance cases from census without documented staff intervention. What they called success was murder distributed across an entire system. No single hand did the killing. It was divided between the nurse who signed the transfer order, the orderly who opened the final door, the administrator who approved the census reduction, and the patient who smiled with relief every time they told him, "Thank you." Legacy: there are no surviving family members for the missing. There are no graves. There are no plaques or memorials. Only a storage box containing 24 names, and a man who believed until his last day that he had redeemed himself. He never understood that the final kindness they showed him, the gentle release, the assurance that he had done well, was part of the same mechanism. When he was no longer needed, they escorted him out the same way he escorted the others, quietly, without incident. He walked away believing he had been forgiven. He never realized he had simply fulfilled his purpose. Obedience is the most silent form of violence, especially when the obedient never learns what they have done. That is the end of the record. There is nothing left to uncover. Only a line of vanished people, and a single phrase written over their absence. They said, "I helped."